And to that I say, hello, good evening, and welcome. I am Samuel Trapp. This is International Flavor. You are listening to Damn Radio, and it seems to me that we need to pass out some news here. This just came up, and this news is interesting, to say the least. This just came out not long ago at all. And let us see if we can play it without destroying anything here. It's only 30 seconds, so if it does, hopefully it's not too shabby. But something just happened today.
The Supreme Court will allow President Donald Trump's ban on transgender people serving in the military. The ban can take effect while court challenges continue. A Seattle-based federal district judge paused Trump's ban in March. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt called the decision a massive victory, while lawyers for transgender service members called it a devastating blow.
Well, I hate to say it, and I don't want to be beat up over this or nothing, but I totally agree. I think this is something that really needed to happen. I'll tell you a little bit of a story about that before we get to today's topics. By the way, if you wish to call in, please feel free to do so at 573-746-8020. I would be happy to chat with you today on pretty much any topic. I'm going to read to you the court's order. I got on the Supreme Court's website and opened it up. It's very short. And so the status of this case is as follows. Trump won, got an order in his favor at the circuit court, and then the opposing party asked for a stay and received a stay of the proceedings in the court, and then the Trump administration appealed that. So basically, here's the order. It's very short. The application for stay, they tried to stay the order, saying you couldn't stay the proceedings, that the order could proceed, basically. The application for stay presented to Justice Kagan and by her referred to the court is granted. So there, the March 27, 2025 preliminary injunction entered by the United States District Court for the Western District of Washington, case number blah, 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 is stayed pending the disposition of the appeal in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit and disposition of a petition for writ of certiorari. Since we're in the Ninth Circuit, this stay will be granted. Is nonsense. If such writ is timely sought. Should certiorari be denied, this stay shall terminate automatically. In the event certiorari is granted, the stay shall terminate upon the sending down of the judgment of this court. Justice Sotomayor, Kagan, and Jackson would deny the application. So there you have it. Three of them would deny the application, but the other six said okay, is what it appears. So keep track of that one. I believe that's going to come up, and we shall have to keep an eye on this and hopefully know where it's coming from. That'll be entertaining, to say the least. So I did want to talk about this just a little bit because I think that my service in the military and what we went through back then has some relevance, just so you know where we came from, okay? When I joined the military way back when, in the 80s, there were no gays allowed in the military. And if you were discovered to be gay, they could put you out, okay, of the military. And they would put you out because, it was, perceived to be wrong. I make no comment one way or the other, right, wrong, indifferent. I don't care what you do in the privacy of your own home. I just hate it being, preached to us that people who are alternative lifestylists, as we liked to call them when I served in the military, that they're actually better than the rest of us and have superior rights to the rest of us. They are superior. They should be granted better positions. They should be given preferential treatment, which I'm completely against. If it wasn't so, I don't know, maybe if they weren't so loud about it, I wouldn't care. Maybe if they didn't always try to turn it into all about them, I wouldn't care. But it's always got to be all about them. They can't be normal. Whether you want to call them, maybe that is, maybe that's where I'm wrong. Maybe they are normal. Okay, well, I don't think so. I think that they have turned it into all about them instead of about the army in this case, instead of the army being what is most important. What is most important is their ability to not conform, is their right to not conform. Well, you gave those rights up when you entered the military. You have to conform. You signed a contract. If they can send you to war, and if you're going to claim you're a woman because a woman can't be in this particular, I don't know what, job category, can't be forced into combat, and whatever those rules are, I haven't looked at them in a long time. But I got to say, this to me is somewhat welcome. That I just want the discussion to be gone. I don't want to talk about this anymore. I want it to, and I also think that the military is just the wrong place for this. Now, when I first got in, like I said, the policy was no gay. They could ask you and you had to answer. And in fact, I remember in St. Louis, called MEPS station, Military Entrance and Processing is what MEP stands for. And they have a place in I think it's still there. I'm not positive. But I remember going there and, well, they treat you like you're, I don't know what, like you're, just a bag of meat in there. And we're all naked. There's like 30 of us in a room marching around completely naked in this room. And I always thought that was just the worst. It's like, I don't understand this. Why does everybody have to be naked? And then what they did. So this is, I'm completely digressing here, but now you've got to hear a story because I can't go an entire show without telling a Samism or a story. And so there I joined the military when I was 20, so I was 19 and a half or something when all this occurred. And I'm in St. Louis, so you take tests all day. You're taking the ASVAB, and for me, I had to take the language test, which was interesting to say the least. And then you go and you get your physical. So this physical process is like several hours where you march through, and they check you out. They don't want to buy your injuries, because once you sign that contract, they've bought your injuries. If they haven't checked you out, so they check you out very well before you got in. I was pretty healthy. I had no worries. So, and I don't know what the hell, I'm 19. I don't know as a friend of mine would always say, you can't find your ass with two hands and a map. Well, we had to find our asses that day, I'll tell you. and I'll tell you how that story went. So, and those of you who already been to the MEPS know where I'm going with this, and probably kind of comical. And if you want to call in and reminisce about it, 573-746-8020. Crazy story. And so we're all marching around in there carrying this little packet of papers, and everywhere you went, somebody signed it, and you're marching around to several different rooms. And I heard that from several girls that went through the process, they're doing the same thing on another floor with all the women who are marching around naked, going through all this same stuff. Different procedures, I'm sure, but for us, so we go in this room, and this room has nothing in it except benches along all the outer walls, and these benches are there, and so you got a stack of your clothes, and you've got all these papers on top of your clothes. You're carrying your shoes, and they told you to make sure to wear like flip-flops or slip-on shoes or something like that, and and you weren't, coats were all stored downstairs if you went during that time of year, and blah blah blah. So in this room, there all 30 of us come in, or however many there were, and the doctor says, and there's then a doctor, and the doctors at the VA centers or the MEPS center were always these old retired dudes that would come in and just start telling you what to do, and they treat you like crap anyway, because you're just nothing but a signature on a piece of paper, and they don't give a crap about you. They just want you to do what you're told. And so they come in, and I remember first round, this doctor goes around, and there are two nurses standing there, and two nurses, women, two female nurses in there, and we're all going, this sucks, we're standing here naked in front of these women, we don't know who the hell they are, and there are a couple of guys who had problems, right, and it was hilarious. So I'll remember this to my last days in life. So we're all standing around in this room. The doctor says, okay, put all your paperwork behind you and your clothes and put everything on the bench, and you just stand here. I'm going to come by, and after every and he goes around and it's turn your head and cough, basically. Okay, everybody, turn your head and cough, turn your head and cough, turn your head and cough. And so he goes to the first guy, turn your head and cough. And then he takes off the vinyl glove he's wearing, the one-time use glove. They put a different one on him, and he does the next guy. And then the one nurse is collecting the discarded gloves, and the other one is helping him put on the new one. They're trying to keep the process going pretty quickly, right? And we're all standing in all our glory or lack thereof, and these doctors going around. Well, twice during the round, and I was toward the end. We were lined up by last name, and I'm a T, so I'm toward the end. But twice in this process, a couple of the guys had erection issues, right? And so. And you would think after the first guy had this problem, I guarantee you there shouldn't have been a second in the room, but there was, because I don't know if you remember, and most guys know this game, but there used to be this dead finger thing when I was in high school where you would flip your fingers and hit somebody with the fingers, and it can be pretty painful. And I know most of the guys know what I'm talking about, and everybody'd walk around flipping their fingers, and you could hit somebody in the arm and leave a pretty good welt with this dead finger thing. I don't know what it was called, but people would do it. Well, I saw this doctor, this kid, and I just saw it out of the corner of my eye, and the guy goes whack, and he just whacked the guy's erect weenie there, and that was the end of that. And then he went on about his business. Well, he had to do it again in the row, and I'm like, oh my God, I don't care if some nurse is standing in front of me, that ain't happening. But it wasn't even a struggle. Anyway, total digression from the original topic on there. But there we stand in there. So that process went around. Well, then they made a second round around the room. And here's the point of this story, okay? The point of the gays in the military. Because when I went in the military, they checked you out. And and they would, and here's how they checked you out. And it was not one of my favorite moments either. So here's what happened. Basically, the doctor said at the end of this loop around the room, where he went through all of us and did the turn your head and cough nonsense, he then said, all righty, now what I want you to do is turn around, face the benches, and lean down, put your elbows on the benches, and the benches were just for sitting on. Put your elbows on the benches, and when I come to you, I want you to grab your cheeks and spread them apart. And that's like, oh, jeez, this sucks. And so he starts going around the room, and then he again with the glove thing, they're discarding and putting on new gloves and doing stuff like that. And then, so this procedure goes on for a little while too. And then when he apparently, they're taking notes and whatever as they get around, and one of the nurses has a clipboard as well, or the doctor has a clipboard, and as he does, he takes notes on this clipboard. And then at the end, all of us are in the room. We turn around, we stand back up. He goes, that was the end of that was the final thing of the day, and he goes, all right, at this point, you can all start getting dressed. And he said, we'll be back in 5-10 minutes. So we all get dressed, and we're just, oh, God, thank God it's over, And when he comes back in with these nurses, he says, all right, if I come by and I tap you on your shoulder, I want you to pick up your things and go into, there was like a little room next door, kind of like an interrogation room. And he says, I want you to pick up your things and go in there. And he goes, if I don't tap you on the shoulder, you go through this other door and you proceed with your stuff, and that'll be mostly all for you today. That's that. You're basically done, and your recruiter will be out there to pick you up, and have the end of the day. That's it. So, I didn't get tapped is all I know. And so we're going outside, and I remember asking either my recruiter or whatever it is we were talking about in the room, and what they were talking about was that, and I believe it was the recruiter that told me, because I was like, what in the world are they looking for checking up our butts? It's like, I don't need any of that. I'm not into that nonsense. God knows I don't want that. And he goes, oh, they can tell whether you're gay. They can tell whether you're, this is how stupid I was back then. They can tell whether you're gay. And I say, how in the world are they going to do that? From look, oh, I get it. So I'm not sure, that, but I remember that. And after I got in, it was after I got in and had gone through a little bit of treatment, they had changed the policy at some point, either right before or right after I got in, to say that it was still, you couldn't be openly gay, but remember the policy was don't ask, don't tell, meaning we aren't going to interfere in your bedroom. We aren't going to tell you what you can and cannot do, but you cannot be openly gay in the military. You can't go, I don't know what, be a royal flamer. You can't go wandering around in high heels if you're a man. You can't go wearing women's uniform if you're a man. And frankly, I thought that was, I don't know, a justice. I saw it as, I don't really give a crap what people do in there, and I don't care if you're gay, it doesn't bother me. Just leave me out of it. I don't want anything to do with that. You should allow me to like women, and you can like men if you like, but don't like me if I don't want to be liked by men. Okay? That's what I wanted. And so I think that was a reasonably good, it was the middle of the 80s, and, MTV was all over with everybody was gay and everybody was wearing spandex, and George Michael and Elton John were, an item, and there were stories about, all kinds of weirdness going on, the Richard Gere thing and who knows what. And, but I never was for openly gay in the military. So, at any rate, you probably didn't need to hear that ridiculous story. I have my reasons for it, too. Frankly, I don't think that is the place to hear it. Now, I think somewhat differently of it now, especially since I know that there's a hell of a lot of gay among bodybuilders and manly men, that there's a ton of gay among that type of people. And not that I care. I don't care. Again, I'm more concerned about whether you're capable of doing the job, and I don't want to think about it. And I don't want men who identify as women in a foxhole with me. I don't want that. So I'm against, and I'll keep those views to myself for the most part. But I am going to read you the article that accompanied that that order as well. And the article is from Courthouse News Service. It says Supreme Court says transgender troops can be booted from the military, handing a win to Trump. Transgender service members slam the Trump administration's ban as emanated by bigotry and the proposition that transgender people do not exist. I think you exist. I just don't. You think you should exist in the military. I think everybody needs to be the same in the military. And I don't want men wearing women's uniforms in the military. I don't give a crap if you want to do it in the privacy of your own home, but everybody needs to be identical, needs to be the same based on their biological sex in the military. So anyway, here's the story. Transgender Americans can be banned from military service. The Supreme Court ruled Tuesday, allowing Trump administration to expel thousands of active duty troops. Now, I think that is probably going to be an indication to the lower court in the Ninth Circuit that they better be pretty careful what they rule upon, and that the court has already said what they intend. And, it's going to be tough to overturn this in the event that it is granted. It'll be a big deal. And so in a short order, which I just read to you, the justices cleared the way for the White House to begin enforcing its prohibition on transgender service members. The court did not explain its order. Justices Sotomayor, Kagan, and Ketanji Brown dissented. President Trump signed an executive order in January declaring transgender Americans unfit for duty, stating that honoring the falsehood of chosen gender identity is not consistent with the humility and selflessness required of a service member. Now, frankly, I agree with that sentiment. The selflessness required, it is not about you, not in the military, and it never is. You have to be an interchangeable cog in a wheel that has nothing to do with your chosen gender or whether you've decided to be, I don't know what, a cat, or anything like that. You can identify as whatever you want. Just do it quietly, okay? And without changing a uniform, In February, Secretary of Defense Hegseth issued a memorandum disqualifying troops with gender dysphoria and ordering immediate separation from service. Policy included an exemption for individuals with gender dysphoria who have never attempted to transition and wanted to serve under their birth sex. Now, I can handle that. I'm okay with that. 7 transgender service members and 1 prospective recruit sued the administration, arguing that the policy was unlawful. Now, notice where they picked and choose to file this in the Ninth Circuit, in the Western United States, covering California, Washington, That they know that court is likely to rule in their favor because it's huge liberals. That's where all the weird rulings come from, or the first start of crazy rules comes from that end of the country. An unprecedented degree of animus toward transgender people animates and permeates the ban. It is based on the shocking proposition that transgender people do not exist, wrote these troops. Two lower courts agreed, barring Hegseth from enforcing his memorandum until the issue was fully reviewed. Trump asked the justices to step in, claiming that judges were nullifying the Defense Department standards necessary to deliver a deployable force. If the separation of powers means anything, the government obviously suffers irreparable harm when an unelected judge usurps the role of the political branch in operating the nation's armed forces, said U.S. Solicitor General John Sawyer. Lambda Legal and Human Rights Campaign Foundation called the ruling a devastating blow to transgender service members. What about the people that took the or refused to take the COVID shot? That was some BS. They got booted out. Nobody cried over that. By allowing this discriminatory ban to take effect while our challenge continues, this court has temporarily sanctioned a policy that has nothing to do with military readiness and everything to do with prejudice, the groups that represent the service members before the court said in a statement. Transgender individuals meet the same standards and demonstrate the same values as all who serve. Well, I'm fine with that if you do it in the proper uniform. Of the over 2 million people in the U.S. military, only 4,240 are transgender. During his first term, Trump implemented a similar ban, but the Biden administration reversed it, allowing transgender troops to openly serve in the military for 4 years. The Supreme Court allowed his ban to take effect, so Trump reasoned that the justices should do the same here. Transgender troops said that the two bans were only similar in their discrimination. Under Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis, active duty members were allowed to continue their service. Because these troops had enlisted and served before the ban was announced, Mattis determined that the Defense Department had to honor prior contracts with the service members. Biden's former Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, allowed transgender troops to serve if they met the same standards as any other service member. Mattis' policy was based on an independent judgment by military officials that predicted what issues open transgender service members could pose. Transgender service members fault Hegseth for not conducting a similar assessment, noting that Defense Department now has actual data about transgender troop service under Austin. U.S. District Court Judge Benjamin Settle blocked enforcement of Hegseth's policy. The George W. Bush appointee stated that the administration didn't explain why transgender troops who have served openly for the past 4 years without problems should suddenly be banned. Well, why were we going to, there were people who refused to take the COVID shot that have been healthy forever. And why weren't they allowed to continue serving? They were just booted without a second thought. U.S. District Court Judge Anna Reyes also blocked enforcement of the policy in a separate case brought by 14 service members in the District of Columbia. A Joe Biden appointee, Reyes said that leaders have historically used concern for military readiness to deny marginalized people the privilege of serving. Well, now they're privileged people, and they marginalize everyone else. That's the way I look at it. A 3-judge panel on the D.C. Circuit seemed similarly skeptical that the policy wasn't an outright ban. U.S. Circuit Judge Cornelia Pillard, an Obama appointee, said the government couldn't justify its policy beyond a distaste for trans people. Curious. I don't know, folks. I think it's long past time to get past the I don't know, the lifting up, the superiority of placing transgenders as superior to non-transgender. That is my problem with the whole affair. I just don't like it. There were some interesting comments on that little video I played. Here, let me read a couple. This was by AJ Lacoste. AJ Lacoste, about an hour ago. His notes are as follows. I was drafted. I went in as a boy. I left as a man, not a woman. That's a good one. I like that. It says, straightness is your only qualification in life. Good for you. You want a cookie, so, spoken like a kiddo who still struggles to understand the difference. Bless your heart. This guy is ancient as dirt if he was drafted in the U.S. At least he served and fought like a real man. Where did you serve again? Protesting Trump and abortion rights doesn't mean you serve the country. I like that. Good. No more bowing and scraping to this mindset. They are too precious to sacrifice. Oh, yes. I don't know. It's funny how people say allow when he is the commander-in-chief of the U.S. military. They have no say in what he does with our military. So I don't know. I've got, it's Trump's the commander-in-chief, not the Supreme Court. I still say put him out. I don't give a crap. Put him out. And there you have it. Strange days indeed. Strange freaking days. What else? Here, want to hear the same from the Supreme Court just because I like it? Here goes.
News from the Supreme Court.
The justices are allowing the Trump administration to move forward with its ban on transgender people from serving in the military, pending an appeal.
NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos joins us now. Danny, we just got this decision, so I know you're probably still reading through it, but this is nuanced a little bit. But for this moment, the Supreme Court is saying you can go ahead with your ban.
The decision was a paragraph, people. It wasn't long at all. I don't know. I was trying to find out what they were saying about it on the other side of the world and see if there was anything exciting that came out about that. But so far, nothing. There's just nobody has it's maybe, probably not important enough. I don't know. But I don't see any opinion pieces. I got nothing. I have a lot to read from the other side of the world, though. So let's get to it, if you don't mind. It is. I wonder if there's any on the opinion side. No, nothing. We're still so. We're now on the 6th. We're only 2 days away, less than that now because they're ahead of us, from the 72-hour Victory Day ceasefire proposal for the Victory Day parade, Victory Day celebration in Russia. And that is one of the top stories in the Russian Republic, Russian Federation anyway. Putin's 72-hour Victory Day ceasefire proposal still on the table, according to the Kremlin. Russian forces will, however, give an adequate response to any attacks by Ukraine during that time, says spokesman Dmitry Peskov. Russian President Putin, his 72-hour Victory Day ceasefire proposal is still valid. Moscow forces have been given orders to halt military activity. At the same time, Peskov warns that if Ukraine chooses not to honor the truce and attempts to strike Russian military positions, an adequate response will be given immediately. Putin announced the unilateral ceasefire last week, stating that Russian troops would suspend all offensive operations from midnight on May 7 to midnight on May 10. According to the Kremlin, the 3-day pause has been proposed as a humanitarian gesture to mark the 80th anniversary of the Soviet victory over Nazi Germany and could serve as a chance for the start of direct negotiations with Kiev without preconditions. Peskov stated the truce is also intended to test if Ukraine really wants to settle the conflict and to offer it a chance to demonstrate its commitment to de-escalation. You know, I got to tell you, I never thought of that before. Instantly, Zelensky refused this, saying nobody wants 3 days, we want 30 days. But if you think about it this way, that you're saying, okay, we've offered you 3. What if they make good at it and then they say, well, how about we proceed and continue and let's start talking? You'd be better off not attacking during the Victory Day parade and firing upon civilian structure, firing upon Victory Day parades, and that kind of thing. Although I believe there's a very serious chance that Ukraine might conduct very serious attacks during that time, and if they do, I think we should be out. I still think, like I said yesterday, that somebody ought to tell this clown that you better not. Somebody better say something. And there's some articles to that effect today, but we'll get to them if at all possible. Ukraine's Zelensky has rejected the offer, dismissing it as a Russian ploy and an attempt at manipulation. In what way? This I don't get. That's never been made clear to me. In a statement following the announcement, he instead called for an immediate, unconditional 30-day ceasefire, which Moscow has claimed is an attempt to buy time for retreating Ukrainian forces. Zelensky also claimed that Putin's ceasefire proposal is intended to ensure calm during Russia's Victory Day parade on May 9. Well, of course it is. That's the point, and suggested that Kiev could not guarantee the safety of foreign leaders planning to attend the celebration. Ukrainian MP Yuri Pavlenka has also proposed attacking Moscow's Red Square during the parade. He's been open about it. Zelensky just gave veiled threats. Moscow condemned Zelensky's remark. Russian Foreign Ministry spokesman Maria Zakharova interpret them as a direct threat and proof of Kiev's terrorist nature. Now, I think it's a direct threat as well, and it's just nonsense that you can't keep your poop in a group for 3 whole days. Do something. This is nonsense. There's been, as I said yesterday, leading up to the ceasefire on the 8th, and I still believe that Ukraine is very seriously checking out and testing the air defenses of Russia in many different regions, and there's an article to that effect. Russian air forces respond to drone raids on Moscow. Another one. At least 19 UAVs were downed en route to the Russian capital, according to Sergei Sobyanin. Moscow has repelled a multi-wave Ukrainian drone attack, said Mayor of Moscow, Sergei Sobyanin, in a series of Telegram posts early Tuesday morning. At least one of the drones hit a residential building in the south of the city. The first 5 drones were intercepted at 1:16 a.m. Another was downed about 30 minutes later, followed by 3 more shortly before 2 a.m., all en route to the capital. According to preliminary information, no serious injuries or casualties. The mayor said, adding that emergency services are working at the crash sites and all necessary measures are being taken. At 2:17 a.m., Sobyanin reported that air defenses destroyed 10 more drones flying to Moscow from other directions, raising the total to 19 UAVs intercepted. One of the UAVs fell near Kashirskaya Highway in the south of the city. While the officials shared few details, photos published by TASS indicated that the drone hit the top floor of a residential high-rise, shattered several windows, damaged the storefront of a flower shop. Moscow's Domodedovo, Sheremetyevo, Vnukovo, and Zhukovsky international airports temporarily suspended operations in response to the attack. The mayor reported later on Tuesday that Russian air defense system took down 2 additional Ukrainian drones which were headed toward Moscow. He added that specialists are now working at the crash sites. This week, Russia is celebrating 80th anniversary, blah, blah, blah. And there's been a 3-day ceasefire. Zelensky's other officials in Kiev have issued veiled threats to attack on May 9th. So I don't know. They're testing these air defense capabilities, and they haven't tried to overwhelm them. I mean, that was only 19. To overwhelm, it'd take a hell of a lot more than that. But they sent 245 in the other day into the Crimea area in an attempt to do that. So who knows what they're going to do? But I don't expect all will be quiet on the front. Well, I guess it is Western Front if you're in Moscow, but it's actually south of there, but southwest, let's call it. So I don't know, but I'm definitely going to keep an eye on this topic as we go forward for Victory Day, which will be on Friday. And I think, I don't know, I'm not broadcasting on Friday. I do Thursday night, and so I don't report again until Sunday. So I anticipate that Sunday will be a big day with lots of news and plenty to talk about. Based on, I believe they're going to do something dastardly, the Ukrainians, on that day. That is what I believe. I hope I am wrong, but we shall see about that. Where are we going from now? So This is still going on these days. And this is a more of an opinion piece, but I've read through it and I agree with it, so I'm going to share it with you. The EU and NATO are promoting Russophobia in the style of Goebbels' propaganda, said Sergei Shoigu. Moscow must crush Nazism, which has resurfaced in the West in recent years, said Russian Security Council Secretary Sergei Shoigu. On Tuesday, ahead of the 80th anniversary of the Great Patriotic War, the victory, Russia's term for the 41-45 Soviet war against Nazi Germany, Shoigu emphasized the enormous price paid by the USSR in defeating Nazi Germany. The multinational peoples of Russia have learned well the lessons of the Great Patriotic War, Shoigu wrote in Rossiyskaya Gazeta. The secretary served as defense minister from 2012 to 2024. He mentioned nearly 27 million combat deaths and 6.5 million civilian deaths from starvation and disease during the war against the Nazis. Today we are obliged to do everything to defeat resurrected Nazism. This imperative has determined one of the main goals of Moscow's Ukraine campaign. European elites who are being incited and patronized by London and Paris continue to make loud statements about inflicting strategic defeat upon Russia. NATO and the EU have launched programs aimed at preparing the collective West for a direct military conflict with Russia. I think they're already in a direct military conflict with Russia. That's what I think. Ukraine couldn't do this on their own. That has long ago been thrown by the wayside. All these weapons being targeted, Storm Shadows, Taurus missiles, ATACMS, those all have to be targeted by the appropriate country military intelligence data, or they don't get targeted. So I don't think Ukrainians can do it. So I think we're already in a war. I happen to agree with Putin on that one. Aggressive steps by the West are being justified by Russophobic fabrications, the security chief stressed. In order to avoid a repetition of the horrors of the war years, there is an urgent necessity to protect the country from a variety of external and internal threats by further boosting the military, developing the economy, and investing in science and education, he said. In late April, former President Dmitry Medvedev, who now serves as deputy chairman of the Security Council, also insisted that real denazification is required. Nazism needs to be rooted out not only in Ukraine, but in all of Europe. You know, he's not saying that it only exists in Ukraine. And frankly, he could be right. You know, I'm not positive I agree with that, but he did an article. I'm wondering if I already said this to you. I don't think so, but it's possible. But Medvedev now, and I wanted to mention this because people are always anti-Putin. You're a Putin apologist, you're Putin this. But this is my own perspective. And granted, I'm not alone. There are other people who think this way. I think Jeffrey Sachs is one of them. When I listen to some of his topics, and I haven't listened to any in a while of his, but I think he thinks pretty similar to the way I do. But over the past few weeks, you've heard a lot of people say things about, you know, Putin, is a dictator, Putin this and Putin that, and people talking about regime change as a way to go in Russia. Well, regime change might not be your friend. I gotta tell you, in my opinion, after listening to Vladimir Putin for at least 20 years, probably more like 30, and hearing the way he speaks in a position of power, the guy is calm, reasonable, consistent, and very well spoken, and I think thoughtful and not rash, not overreacting, not a Trump. He certainly doesn't have to post everything he thinks on social media. He doesn't have to do that. But he can. He speaks very freely. He's just as interesting and intelligent to listen to as Trump on his good days. You know, I don't like Trump's posts all over the time. I really don't like diplomacy through Facebook and Truth Social and X and all that. I do not like that. I don't think I've ever read a Vladimir Putin post on X. I'm not sure he's got one. I don't know. I'll have to consider that because I've never looked. I don't know that he has a Telegram channel. You know, I know that the Department of or the Ministry of Defense has one, and I like watching some of that. You know, that's actually a more formal release of information. Zakharova, the spokesman for the Secretary of State's office, is very well spoken. That'd be like I suppose she'd be the equivalent of what is her name? Is it Bondi? I wish I could remember off the top of my head, but she, very well spoken, Zakharova, and she gives a 3-hour press conference, 3 times a week, talking about what Sergei Lavrov is up to, and where they're going, and she's a joy to listen to, in my opinion. And if you want real news, you listen to them. You don't need to listen to the 500 questions afterward. You can listen to what they're saying and try to get it from them. Anyway, my point with all this and talking about, this, we got to force Putin to do something or trying to get it. I got news for you. You might not want Putin to not be in charge of Russia. What are you going to get? You could get somebody like Medvedev. Medvedev would be far more harsh, far more I don't know. I suppose dictatorial wouldn't be a good word, because he wasn't dictatorial during the time that he had won the election and was acting that way. What was it during? I can't remember the years, but he had a one. So Putin won one from 2000 to 2005. I don't remember, and then what do you call it? Medvedev was president for the next term, and then Putin's been ever since. And so, there was a period, and Medvedev is a lot more harsh. I don't think anybody would prefer, in the West anyway, would prefer Medvedev over Putin. And obviously they don't in Russia because they haven't elected him back after Putin. But he still holds high government office, and he's still well thought of over there. And here's what he has to say about getting rid of Nazism. And he says it includes all of Europe, and they're not just talking about Kiev. The rebirth of Nazism cannot be allowed in any nation, and Europe may need an international denazification effort, says Dmitry Medvedev. The senior official, currently serving as deputy chair of Russian Security Council, addressed the threat of Nazi ideology during a public lecture in Moscow Tuesday, in which he outlined Moscow's foreign policy priorities. He characterized the destruction of the Kiev neo-Nazi regime as a necessary outcome of the Ukraine conflict, before arguing for broader, decisive action by multiple states. All measures need to be taken to ensure that such regimes never arise in any other nation. The price is too high. And remember, Nazism is what they're after. And Bandera, he was definitely a Nazi supporter. And a lot of these Ukrainian nationalists are Bandera supporters. So, I don't know. The Bandera led a group that killed 100,000 Poles in the city of Lvov back during the war. So the Poles don't like it any more than anybody else does. This neo-Nazi stuff and these Azov brigades, people don't like it. The senior official also ridiculed claims in some Western nations that Russia has plans to attack NATO members. Yeah, I believe that's nonsense too. He calls it nonsense. He claimed it was invented by relevant governments to explain their compliance with the U.S. demands to ramp up defense spending, as well as to scapegoat Russia for their own economic problems. Medvedev stressed that the distinction between the current Ukrainian government, who he brands bloody freaks, and the Ukrainian state, saying that its future was uncertain. Officials in Kiev are cutthroats who are sending peaceful citizens of their own nation to the slaughter without a second thought, and are not qualified to govern Ukraine, said Medvedev. He stressed that a regime founded on neo-Nazi ideology does not have a right to exist. Ukrainian statehood may survive the current clash, said Medvedev, noting that he personally is skeptical of this based on what he views as its lack of utility to Western nations. If the country persists, it must not be allowed to join any military bloc hostile toward Russia, he stressed. Russia's victory in the conflict, which Medvedev considers inevitable, will serve as the first step toward a sustainable peace in Europe and the creation of a fairer, multipolar, there's that word again, people, world. People don't like the hegemony of all things Western. They just don't like it. So, I don't know. I find that topic interesting. I tell you. Here's some Canadian news. This I hadn't heard yet, and if JR had heard it, JR, I only get to listen to about a half hour of your program today, so if I'm repeating something you already said, I apologize, but I find this kind of funny, and so I'd probably have repeated it anywho, and it's my program, so I can put whatever I want, at least with your permission, right? Here's an article, also from the other side of the planet. Canadian province could hold a succession referendum, says the premier. And this is Alberta. Alberta's Danielle Smith has said a vote on separation will be held next year if the petition gains enough support. How do you like that? Alberta could hold a public referendum on breaking away from Canada next year if a citizen-led petition gets the required number of signatures, said the province's premier Danielle Smith on Monday. The Western province has long clashed with the federal government over legislation limiting fossil fuel development and promoting clean energy, which Alberta officials say unfairly targets their economy. Smith's announcement comes days after the Liberal Party secured a fourth consecutive turn in the federal election, deepening political divides between Ottawa and oil-rich Alberta. Following the election, the Alberta Prosperity Project launched a petition calling for a referendum on the province's independence. Excuse me. Death to me. I have a scratchy throat. Sorry. The petition has garnered more than 80,000 signatures in 36 hours of its May 2nd launch and remains open for public support. Should Ottawa, for whatever reason, continue to attack our province as they have done over the last decade, ultimately that will be for Albertans to decide. I don't see it going anywhere, frankly, but that's me. Sorry, I have a scratchy throat, as I said. She added that although she does not personally support the idea of separation, she would respect the will of the voters. I will accept their judgment, said the premier. Recently, her government also introduced legislation to lower the threshold for referendums initiated by citizen petition. The bill reduces the number of citizen signatures needed from 20% to 10% of eligible voters from the last provincial election and extends the collection period from 90 to 120 days. In order to pass this threshold, a petition will need about 177,000 signatures. Smith noted that Alberta doesn't want special treatment or handouts. It just wants to be free to develop its incredible wealth of resources and choose how to provide health care and education. She expressed hope that secession would not be necessary and that her government would be able to reach an agreement with Prime Minister Mark Carney and Canada's new government. Last week, Carney's Liberal Party, blah, blah, blah. We don't want to read all that part, but think about this. So, the military of Canada, does it even exist? How large is Canada's military? I looked this up once before, but I don't remember. So get this. Canada's armed forces has an authorized strength, get this is huge, of 71,000 regular force members and 30,000 reserve force members. However, current force is approximately 60,000 regular and 22,000 reserve, meaning they are short by about 16,500 personnel. The CAF is composed of the Canadian Arm of the Royal Canadian Air Force and the Royal Canadian Navy. Now, do you think they could force an issue? That's my point. Could they force somebody? You know, what would they say? So if Alberta decides to leave, and this 177,000 people vote to leave, and then they have a referendum, I don't think it'll pass. I really don't. But suppose that they did. Do you think the military could stop them? Curious and curious. And Trump has a good point when he says that if they joined us, they wouldn't have to have a military; they'd have ours. He said something else too. Trump suggests Canadians should vote for him. The U.S. president repeats his claim that a neighboring country would be better off if it became a 51st state. That was a couple of weeks ago, so we won't read that again. Where are we? Here's some Viktor Orban news and blasting of Zelensky. Hungarians will decide whether to support Kiev's accession to the EU without external influence, according to the Prime Minister. Whether it was yesterday or a few days ago, I was telling you that Orban was pretty pissed off about the pressure that he's getting and the torment he's getting from Zelensky, telling him what people from Hungary want. Like Zelensky knows, right? Zelensky gets to tell Orban what they want. And of course, Zelensky would like to see a pro-Kiev government, but I've told you most of this already. Like you can't get into Ukraine without Hungary, says Orban. Every Hungarian will have their say on this, like it or not. Very interesting. Let's see. We're going to continue. Here's an EU nation. Slovak President Peter Pellegrini will now have to respond to a petition and hold a referendum. Why? 400,000 signatures have been gathered in an EU nation saying that they wish to remove sanctions against Russia. This is interesting. The video shows a pickup truck full of boxes, and the heading says, "Petitioners hand over 400,000 signatures to the Slovak government against Russian sanctions." EU critic. Let's see. That's just another note at the bottom of the screen. But let's go through this. This is important. Activists in Slovakia have gathered nearly 400,000 signatures demanding the lifting of EU sanctions against Russia. Country's president, Peter Pellegrini, will now have to respond to the petition and consider holding a referendum within a month. Members of the Slovak Revival Movement, SHO, and the National Party, DOMOV, who are behind the petition, have submitted the signatures to the office of the president. They want the government to pose the following question to the citizens. Do you agree that sanctions against the Russian Federation harm Slovak citizens? Now remember, Slovakia has a very pro-Russia population. They just do. Commenting on the initiative that was launched late last year and surpassed the 350,000 threshold for consideration, Pellegrini's office has promised to handle petition sheets strictly in accordance with the law. Wouldn't be surprised if there's some sort of shenanigans to not do what you are supposed to do. We shall see. Keep your eye on this one. I shall do it for you. SHO leader Robert Svek said he expects the president not to ignore the petition and to call for a referendum, citing Pellegrini's own presumed skepticism regarding anti-Russian sanctions. In late March, activists held a conference called For Slovakia Without Sanctions that was attended by a number of politicians and economists. Speaking at the time, D-Move leader Pavel Sloda claimed that Slovakia's future depends on whether the sanctions against Moscow will be lifted or not. It's about our whole nation, all Slovak citizens. Economist Peter Stanek in turn said that there are dozens of studies that clearly show that sanctions have never worked. I agree with them, by the way, affecting instead those who impose them. I agree. Slovakia implemented the sweeping EU sanctions imposed on Russia following the escalation of the Ukraine conflict in February 22. Robert Fico, who became prime minister in 2023, has maintained the punitive measures are not working and do more harm to member states than to Moscow. I happen to agree. That is absolutely true. So we got war brewing, and actually India striking terrorist targets in Pakistan. And so this, wars and rumors of wars, friends and neighbors, they are upon us. But first, let's go to China. U.S. spy agency has released recruitment videos targeting Chinese officials. And so China is calling out CIA provocations. I've seen that video. Somebody played it. Wasn't it JR? I think played it. I don't remember. Beijing has accused the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency of committing political provocations by releasing recruitment videos in Chinese targeting officials in the country. Speaking at a press conference on Tuesday, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian stated that the U.S. has long been using all kinds of despicable methods to steal other countries' secrets, interfere in their internal affairs, and commit subversion. The diplomat characterized such attempts as being in breach of international law and basic norms governing international relations. I kind of agree. The U.S. not only maliciously smears and attacks China, but also blatantly attempts to lure Chinese personnel, even government officials, to be their informants, said Lin. He pledged that Beijing would take all measures necessary to push back infiltration and sabotage activities from overseas and defend national sovereignty, security, and development interest. CIA recruitment videos published last Thursday solicit covert cooperation from those in China who possess information about economic, fiscal, and trade policies or work in the defense industry, national security, diplomacy, science, or advanced technology. This is crazy. The spy agency promised to keep its informants' identities protected, offering instructions on how to safely make contact. Last month, the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service released a similar ad targeting CIA officers, titled, "Your Option, Together for the Truth," evoking the camaraderie shared by the U.S. and the USSR during World War II. The video called on CIA personnel to join in resolving the Ukraine conflict, describing the authorities in Kiev as tainted by neo-Nazi influence and corruption, both of which I happen to agree with. The video came after the CIA reached out to Russian military engineers through a clip of its own in March. The U.S. spy agency previously produced several other recruitment videos targeting Russia, appealed to various ethnic and social groups. Isn't that crazy? But there's been something else that came up saying that a meeting is anticipated between the Russian spy chief and the CIA boss. This is going to be interesting, right? I only got to read part of this, so this is going to be pretty new. Guy's name is Sergei Narishkin, has said that he held a phone call with John Ratcliffe and announced a possibility of future face-to-face talks. Crazy. Between the Russian Foreign Intelligence Services and its chief, Sergei Narishkin, and said that he may soon meet with CIA Director Ratcliffe, saying that they had a very constructive phone call together. The two intelligence heads held their first phone discussion in March. Narishkin disclosed the time that both sides had agreed to maintain regular contact to help reduce tensions in relations. Meanwhile, the CIA's got all kinds of people living and residing in Kiev. I think that's a little weird, a little iffy, don't you think? Let's see. He highlighted the importance of continuing dialogue even amid strained political conditions. Speaking to reporters on Thursday, Narishkin confirmed that he'd spoken with his U.S. counterpart again and hinted at the possibility of a direct meeting. We had a phone conversation with a colleague, the director of the CIA. It was constructive. Therefore, I do not rule out that a meeting may take place at some time. Isn't that crazy? Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov confirmed that a meeting between two heads of state is being prepared. He expressed hopes that it will be productive, given that both Trump and Putin want results. Yep, that's talking about a meeting between Putin and Trump. What unites Trump and Putin is that they both understand the absurdity of refusing dialogue. They are united by willingness to resolve the most difficult issues through discussion. This is what the previous Biden administration lacked, Peskov told the French magazine Le Point. Tell you what, these are exciting times. It'd be really nice if they got together, met, conferred, and resolved something. Trump and Putin, I say. I think they can. I think it would be worthwhile. Although, it's not if you go in and try to tell Putin what he is going to do. Trump needs to be a diplomat in this case and not a deal maker. And I'm not sure that I believe he's got that capability. I would, I like the way he approaches many, many things, but not his foreign policy so far. So there were lots of issues in Germany and the elections that are going on there, and political chaos as the German coalition failed to elect somebody. But before I get to that, I want to get to some more Trump news because it's being reported on the 6th of May, on today, that a lot of people know who blew up Nord Stream, said Trump. He indicates he doesn't believe claims that Russia destroyed its own pipelines. Well, I'm glad he doesn't believe that, because they didn't. And, that's nonsense, and nobody believes that. U.S. President Trump has dismissed claims that Russia was behind the 2022 sabotage of Nord Stream gas pipelines and suggested that the true culprit is widely known. Speaking at a White House press event, Trump said there was no need for a formal investigation to uncover who carried out the attack which crippled the key energy route between Russia and Western Europe. 3 of the 4 Nord Stream pipelines built to deliver Russian gas to Germany and the rest of Western Europe were damaged by blasts at the bottom of the Baltic Sea in September 2022. On Tuesday, a correspondent for libertarian financial blog Zero Hedge, which has been admitted to White House press events under the new administration, noted that Trump had previously rejected the Western narrative that Russia blew up its own pipelines and asked the president if he was planning to initiate a probe to find out who was actually behind the attack. If you can believe it, they said Russia blew it up, said Trump. Well, probably if I asked certain people, they would be able to tell you without having to waste a lot of money on an investigation. But I think a lot of people know who blew it up, he said, without elaborating. Zero Hedge suggested that Trump's comment meant that, based on classified intelligence, he knows exactly who was behind the destruction of Nord Stream. It also should put the Russia destroyed its own vital and economically lucrative pipeline storyline to rest, said the outlet. In early February 2023, veteran investigative journalist Seymour Hersh, I read this report, by the way, published a report claiming that then-President Joe Biden had given the order and destroyed Nord Stream. I believe that, too. It was a well-written report. I announced on it, long ago. According to an informed source who talked to Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Hersh, the explosives were detonated on September 26, 2022, that had been planted at the pipelines by U.S. Navy divers a few months earlier under the cover of NATO exercises called Balt Ops 22. The White House denied the report, the Biden White House, calling it utterly false and complete fiction. Oh, that means it must be utterly false and complete fiction. God knows the White House would never lie to us, would they? I can't imagine. That'd never happen. Well, senior Russian officials, including President Putin, have previously pointed the finger at the U.S. as the possible culprit behind, I say likely culprit, behind the Nord Stream explosions. They argue that Washington had the technical means to carry out the operation and stood to gain the most, considering that the attack disrupted energy supplies from Russia to the EU and forced a shift to more expensive U.S.-supplied liquefied natural gas. Wouldn't surprise me, friends and neighbors. It just wouldn't. So I heard JR talk about this one yesterday, and here's the Western perspective. And JR talked about hitting non-U.S. films with a 100% tariff. Trump says that Hollywood is dying a very fast death. Now, I only skimmed this article, and it's not horribly long, and I will read it to you. But I want to tell you something about especially Russian film. Although I do watch film from other countries, even with subtitles. It doesn't bother me to have to read subtitles, although most of the time I would prefer to listen to it in Russian or in English, of course. But a lot of movies now, you can listen to them and select the language of what it is, and they have very good translation. Apple's been doing it for a while. I've listened to, for example, Severance. I really liked that show, by the way, and I've watched it in English and in Russian, and I like it. And they do some very good. The translations are actually pretty good, and so I look at movies a little bit differently. And if you can make movies cheaper somewhere else, which you absolutely can, hell, Hollywood makes their movies elsewhere. They just fly to different countries to do it, right? And if you're going to make movies elsewhere, some Russian movies are extremely good. They are every bit as good as ours, and their TV series as well. But anyway, here's the article from the other side. I want to see what the point is at the end and see where it goes at the end, because I haven't finished this article. So some of it's a recap, because I know that JR has already stated about it, and this was from yesterday anyway. But U.S. President Trump announced on Sunday he would impose a 100% tariff on foreign-produced films, marking the first time his restrictive trade policies have extended to the entertainment industry. No, so what does this mean? Does this mean if you go to the movie theater and there's a foreign film playing, instead of paying $8, you'll pay, I don't know, more? I don't know. That sounds weird. And I don't understand or pretend to know all about. But whatever that would mean, where would you pay that tariff at? Or would it only be paid when you import the final product? And so they would pay for that tariff of 100%? And what does that mean? If you spent $1 million to make a movie, does that mean you have to pay $2 million, or I'm sorry, another $1 million to bring it into the U.S.? Or is it just the value of the film? There's plenty of ways to go about this. I don't know what he intends by this. I'd have to get more information before discussing this particular deal. I'm not sure where it ends up. So, at any rate, the article goes as follows. In his post on Truth Social, Trump claimed that American film industry is dying a very fast death due to incentive offered by foreign countries to lure U.S. filmmakers there. Since returning to office in January, Trump has imposed sweeping tariffs, blah, blah, blah. We know the history. Trump has said he has directed agencies, including Commerce, to begin immediately imposing 100% tariff on all foreign-produced films entering the United States. We're on it, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick responded on X. It remains unclear, however, whether the measure would target foreign studios, U.S. companies filming abroad, or both. The U.S. president framed foreign film production as a national security threat, naturally, asserting that other countries were using cinema as a vehicle for messaging and propaganda. We want movies made in America again. Now, I think this is on the ridiculous side. This is what I think. So, agree or disagree, I guess it really doesn't matter. But I think this is a bit loopy. Trump's post came after weekend meetings at his Mar-a-Lago club with actor Jon Voight and his manager Stephen Paul, Bloomberg said, citing people familiar with the matter. They reportedly presented the president with their plans for more federal tax incentives for U.S. film and TV production. In January, Trump appointed Voight, along with actors Mel Gibson and Sylvester Stallone, as special ambassadors to Hollywood to help promote U.S. job growth in the entertainment sector. Hollywood production has been increasingly shifting overseas as countries like the UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand expand tax incentives to attract film and TV projects. Film and television production in LA has declined by 40% over the past decade. The trend has continued to decline in U.S.-based shoots, with studios seeking lower costs and bigger rebates abroad. According to Ampere Analysis, global content spending is expected to hit $248 billion in 2025, driven by largely by streaming platforms, further fueling the push for more affordable production hubs. Trump's move follows China's decision last month to moderately reduce the number of Hollywood films permitted in the country, a retaliatory step against Trump's aggressive tariff policies. William Reich, former senior commerce official and CSIS fellow, warned that retaliation against Trump's film measures would be devastating. We have a lot more to lose than to gain, he told Reuters, adding that justifying tariffs on national security or emergency grounds would be difficult. I happen to agree with that perspective, folks. I don't know. I think that's a little bit on the oddball side. I kind of want to get into the India and Pakistan, but I also wanted to get into this. We talked earlier about the transgender deal in the military at the start of the program. Well, there's another article that came out that is discussing there's been 7 in Paris sentenced for harassing the LGBTQ Olympic organizer. Now, a Paris court has ordered suspended prison terms and fines for cyberbullying of Thomas Jolly, who staged the infamous Last Supper parody. Now, I only saw this after the fact. I didn't watch the Olympics because I thought it was just nonsense, that this was nothing but propaganda for transgenders. The entire thing was a debacle and ridiculous. And I think it had the lowest ratings in forever from a Olympic series. So let's see. 7 people have been sentenced in France for the cyberbullying of Thomas Jolly, the artistic director of the LGBTQ-themed opening ceremony for the Paris 2024 Olympics. Last year's games opened with the controversial spectacle that included what was perceived as a recreation of Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper, featuring drag queens, homosexuals, transsexuals, and pro-obesity activists in the role of Christ. The show was condemned by Christians across the world as well as Muslims, many of whom expressed their frustration on social media. Several days after the event, the production company behind the ceremony, Paname 2024, complained that its employees were getting harassed online and had received death threats. Jolly, who has insisted that the scene was not inspired by the Last Supper, filed a complaint claiming he was a target of homophobic and anti-Semitic threats and insults. In October, French authorities arrested 7 people, including 1 woman, who were accused of writing hateful messages targeting Jolly that included posts like "degenerate Jew," "slut," "God will not forget you," and "you will pay for having disrespected our Lord Jesus Christ." In October, French authorities arrested 7. On Monday, the Paris criminal court found the 7 individuals guilty of repeated death threats, cyberbullying, and aggravated insults based on sexual orientation or real or supposed religious affiliation against Jolly. The court imposed suspended fines of €2,000 to €3,000 and suspended prison sentence of 2 to 4 months and ordered defendants to pay €1 in damages to the artistic director. The 7 defendants aged between 22 and 79 will have to complete a 5-day citizenship course, the court ruled. The ex-accounts of 2 of the accused individuals will be suspended for 6 months. Their post came amid a wave of backlash to the Olympic opening ceremony from the Christian world and the Bishops' Conference of France, claiming that it mocked and ridiculed the faith. The Vatican said it was saddened by the ceremony and that it offended many Christians and believers. The Russian Orthodox Church stated at the time the performance presented a counterculture of godlessness that has emerged in the center of Europe. The head of the church, Patriarch Kirill of Moscow, said it was evidence of the decultivation of moral values and the downward trajectory of spiritual cultural component of Western civilization. The outcry over the event ultimately forced the IOC to apologize and delete the video of the ceremony from online streaming platforms. So you shouldn't be able to find it anymore. Hopefully it is not still there. I don't know. I saw only part of it. I was sickened and turned it off. I think it's just nonsense. Again, all about themselves and not about the people at the Olympics. It's only about that's the biggest complaint I have about it all. It's not about. You want to have your own show? Great. Go start your own show and invite people who like that kind of thing. But to force the world to watch your trash, I'm against totally. So there you have it. I want to get into just a tiny bit about India on terrorist targets. Islamabad has vowed retaliation as the most intense fighting in years broke out between 2 nuclear-armed rivals. India launched Operation Sindoor, targeting what it calls terrorist infrastructure in Pakistan and Pakistan-controlled part of the Kashmir region in retaliation for the deadly terrorist attack in the Baisaran Valley last week. Islamabad condemned the strikes as heinous provocation. New Delhi said it hit at least 9 targets early Wednesday morning, stating that strikes were directed at terrorist camps and not the Pakistani armed forces or civilians. Our actions have been focused, measured, non-escalatory in nature. No Pakistani military facilities have been targeted. India demonstrated considerable restraint in the selection of targets and the method of their execution. Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif strongly condemned the Indian operation, describing the strikes as cowardly. Pakistan has every right to respond forcefully to this act of war imposed by India, and a forceful response will be given. The airstrikes followed the April 22 attack in the Baisaran Valley, which left 26 civilians dead. India has held Pakistan indirectly responsible, alleging cross-border militant involvement. The resistance front, believed to be tied to Pakistani-based Lashkar-e-Taiba, initially claimed responsibility for the attack, though later reports indicate that the group distanced itself from the attack. Islamabad vehemently denies that it had any role in the attacks and has called for an impartial probe. The nuclear-armed South Asian neighbors have fought 4 wars since both gained independence from the UK in 1947. Got to keep an eye on that, people, on that those events. Well, my name is Samuel Trapp. I have been coming to you from the Real Estate State of the Art studio in Lake Ozark, routed through beautiful downtown Florida. I hope you join me every night at the same time, same BAT channel at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time. And I look forward to seeing you. Appreciate you for following on. Appreciation of JR for creating such a great platform. You can send me emails at samuelt@internationalflavor.com and listen to all my podcasts on either damradio/podcasts or internationalflavor.com.